My name is Tom Nixon, and I'm the author of The Long Lost and The Fatal Flaw. My fifth grade teacher somehow lit a fire in me to read literature, all kinds, poems and books and stories, everything. And I was just fascinated by it until the point in high school where I was being asked to write creative stories and articles and persuasive arguments, and I really took to it. And come college, when it was time to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up, I had no idea, but I looked at my report card and I saw C's in math and B's in science and D's in economics and A+ in English. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to be an English major. And ever since, I've had this fuel to just keep writing and writing, and now I sort of write for a living. I like to joke that it took me 20 years to write my first book and 6 months to type it. So I had 3 ideas kicking around in my brain. Couldn't figure out, I never thought they would ever come together in one story, which is ultimately what happened with The Long Lost. I kept trying to finish 3 different stories, and I kept hitting a roadblock of why would I invest so much time into writing a story that's never going to see light of day, because for many years there was a gatekeeper between you and your audience, and that was first an agent, then a publisher. And around 2015 or so, Amazon self-publishing comes out, and there's now suddenly no gatekeeper between you and an audience. So divine inspiration struck once again, and I said, you know those 3 ideas that you had in your mind for 20 years? What if they went together like this? And I instantly got energized, sat down at a keyboard, and literally 6 months later, it was ready to press. There are elements of my own childhood friendships in the first book. There are elements of love interests and relationships in this book, but really I drew upon this sort of sick mind that I have to turn it into a crime suspense novel. I had 2 sides of me that were kind of at war with each other for a time. One is I wanted to write like the great American novel, like something with sentimentality, something that people would remember. But there was this other side of me that likes books by Harlan Coben and Dan Brown that gets really energized by page turners, where you get to the end of the chapter and there's this huge cliffhanger and you can't wait to open up the next chapter. And so I struggled with, well, which one, if I'm going to write a novel, which one should I do? And so what I tried to do with the first book is to do both of that at once. So hopefully people will feel like there's some depth to the story, but that it's a good summer beach read as well that maybe you could get through in a week. About 7 years after publishing my first book, I think the resolve wore off. The resolve being, after the first one, I said, I'm never doing that again, because it was time consuming and you put a lot of heart and soul into something, and I have a day job and it's not writing novels. So that must have worn off, because I started to get these little tingles again, these ideas, and I had multiple ideas. You know, if I ever do write another book, I probably won't, but if I ever do, it's going to be about this. And one day I said, you know what, I'm going to write that book, and I'm going to answer a question that people keep asking me as a writer. And I said, but I'm going to do it in this book, but I need a twist. And I was thinking, I don't know, what is this twist going to be? And then I read Kenny Loggins' autobiography, being a yacht rock geek that I am, and there's a story, his autobiography is gripping, it's called Still All Right, you should read it. It reads like a novel, even though it's a memoir. And there's a story that he tells about, as a young child, you know, maybe in his teens, early 20s, he goes to a carnival and gets his fortune told, and it's the most bizarre fortune, yet oddly specific, that like he couldn't get it out of his mind. And I won't spoil that because it factors into my book. So I borrowed that from your life, Kenny. Thank you. I do acknowledge you in the book. And that was the last thing that said, all right, you've got your twist. Now you've got to write the book. I like to write very short chapters. It's funny, almost universally the feedback I get is, I love that you write really short chapters. And I do that. That's my Harlan Coben sort of influence, where things happen in short vignettes, but every chapter ends in a cliffhanger, so you almost got to keep reading. So there's fewer chapters in this book. They might be a little bit longer, but ultimately it's about the same length. I dedicated this book to my wife, and soulmate for 30, I better get this right, more than 30 years, going on 40. This book is at one level about finding one's soulmate, and it's about the tragedy of losing that soulmate. And so I thought, who better to dedicate it to than the soulmate who is also doubling as the editor of the book. I get asked a lot, like, how do you have time to do all this, right? How do you have time? You have a full-time job. How do you have time to be a podcast host and be an author? And I ask, the way I answer that is twofold. One is, how do you have time to golf? How do you have time to go on the boat? How do you have time to go to the gym? Like, this is what I do. My recreation is writing and creating things. And I realized about 10 years ago that I always have to be creating something, because I guess it's a condition where if I'm not creating something new and fresh, that the mind gets bored and gets restless at the same time. So, like, the other answer to the question is because I have to. I love to create things from whole cloth so that when it's done, you can say, I did that. And I take, like, that's the enjoyment, that's the fulfillment for me. Like, I'm not getting rich off these books, certainly not getting rich off, I host a number of podcasts, I record and publish music. That's really been always done for an audience of one. And if I can get done with it and be proud of it, then that's mission accomplished for me. When I get notes from strangers or reviews of the book, in some ways it feels like they're thanking me for writing this book or entertaining them for however long it took them to read it, and that gives me a lot of pride, and that gives me a lot of satisfaction and drive to do the next one. So it's amazing to think that anything I'm doing is making an impact on other people, but sometimes they say it is, and that makes me very proud. Both books can be found pretty much at any online retailer. The easiest thing to do is Amazon.com. They'll ship it to you. If you're a Prime member, you'll get it in 2 days. So, but Barnes & Noble, just anywhere that books are sold online, you'll find it. So get out there and read the book.